Hello and welcome to this next in our Time to Think sessions. Today we'll be focusing on self-harm and suicidal feelings. So as a bit of an introduction to get us started, my name's Toby. I'm joined by Amy as well here. We're both part of the whole school approach team at Newport Mine, looking to provide mental health support to young people as well as parents and teachers at the moment. This specific session kind of around supporting parents, caregivers, family members, where there might be some concerns around self-harm or suicidal feelings for your young people. Might be that there's a long history of something like this with your young person, or something that's just coming to the surface now, maybe something that you're concerned is like on the way to becoming to the surface. So there's a kind of a broad range of people that this session might apply to. In terms of our goals for this session, first and foremost, we want to help you understand a little bit more about self-harm and suicidal feelings, what it can look like, where it can come from, what it can mean, that sort of thing. We know that understanding is a really important first step for parents and caregivers to have. We want you to learn what you can do to help your young person in this situation, but more importantly, it's how you can get that help. We're not trying to turn you into professionals or teach you how a professional would deal with the situation. It's just kind of about doing what you can until you can get that professional help. And so we're going to try and help you move along that process, or show you how you can move along in that process. Last thing before we continue, obviously this is a very sensitive and difficult subject for a lot of people, and we don't want you to feel like you have to watch this whole video in one sitting. If you need to take a moment or just come back to it later, then we just want you to know that's totally okay to do as well. Now that we've looked a little bit about our set of goals, we want to talk about the sort of overview of the session in terms of our sort of step-by-step. So it's kind of broken down into three parts. Our first part being about understanding self-harm, some of that understanding that I mentioned just now, as well as what you can do to then keep your young person safe in a situation where there might be some self-harm. And then the second part is very similar, but around suicidal feelings. And then the third and final part is kind of general tips for what you can do in terms of your skills, but also, again, more importantly, general tips around signposting, what kind of support is out there and how you can get into it. In the live version of this, we left space for questions at the end, but we'll talk more about how you can get in contact with us for questions at the end as well. Before we kick off with looking at more about self-harm, we wanted to talk just quickly over some of these stats. We haven't put these in here to scare you or to worry you. It's more to kind of give you some context as to why this is important and kind of how widespread situations like this are. Again, that's not to scare you, but to let you know that this is something that a lot of young people are going through, and a lot of families are getting support with at the moment and are recovering with at the moment. And you can see for yourself those stats on there. Moving on then to have a look at what is self-harm with Amy. Thank you.
Thanks, Toby. So self-harm is the intentional hurting of oneself. There are a variety of methods that people use. Some are more obvious and things that you probably are aware of, such as burning or cutting. But then there are quite a few which are harder to spot. We kind of had a lot of talk about how much to discuss this, but actually a lot of parents have found it really useful to find out about a lot of these different ways, because it means you can understand some of the behaviours going on and see them for what they are. So just to give you an idea of some of the things that can class as self-harm, it can be things like picking at skin or biting at skin. It can be pulling out of hair. It can be to do with things like over control of eating, so either too much or too little. It can be to do with excessive exercise to the point where that is actually harmful, obviously, to the body. So we can class that as self-harm too. It can be things like getting into fights when you know you're going to get hurt. So putting yourself in that line of risk. It can be poisoning yourself, so eating something that you know is going to be harmful to you. It can be to do with overdosing. It can be inserting objects into your body. So there are a lot of different methods there, some more unusual than others, but that's just to give you kind of an overview of that there is actually a variety there that can go on. So why do people self-harm? Usually it's about expressing something which is hard to put into words, maybe that they are finding it's easier to cope with something visible that they can see. So if their pain that they're feeling inside, they can actually then see it on themselves. Somehow that's easier to comprehend. It can be to reduce overwhelming feelings or thoughts as a method of coping and discharging some of those feelings. And that is a release for them, although that is temporary and doesn't necessarily solve the trigger or the issue, the reason that they're feeling overwhelmed. It can be to change emotional pain into physical pain, a little bit like the first point, making something actually visible and tactile. And it can also be to feel a sense of control. Often a lot of young people feel like their life is dictated to them. There's sort of school rules and ways they have to do stuff. There's ways they have to do stuff at home. And a lot of them sometimes struggle to feel that sense of control over their own life. And this is one way they feel they can do that. It can also be about things like escaping traumatic memories, punishing yourself if you feel you've done something wrong or you're not good enough. So it can often be coupled with low self-esteem. It can be conversely as well to stop feeling numb. So sometimes when young people are experiencing difficult feelings, they can dissociate from what's going on and then just have this sort of numbness. And it's actually one way to bring back that sense of being in contact with your body and feeling something again. It can be about creating a reason for others to physically care for you because there's a wound that needs treating. So very much we would say it's not about attention seeking. A lot of people use the term attention seeking in regards to self-harm. We would say it is someone seeking attention, but there is a reason they need that attention. And it may be to do with not feeling that they are getting enough sort of support generally and people talking to them, or that there is a need there that they have. And this is potentially one way of reaching out, although a lot of people who do self-harm, for them it's very private and they don't want people to know about what they're doing. So it's very much about the individual, and I think if your young person it's worth talking to them about the motivations that they have and what the situation is for them. Okay, so moving on to some of the consequences of self-harm. Although, as I mentioned before, there may be short-term relief, the cause of the distress is likely to remain. So again, that's about talking to your young person about what the cause of distress is and if there's any way that they feel something could be done about it, or if there's any way you can support them to do something about it. Again, it's not necessarily about as an adult trying to problem solve it, which we'll come on to slightly later, but about supporting them and what they feel about the situation. Obviously, self-harm does carry a physical risk depending on what they're doing and to what degree, so that needs managing. And self-harm can trigger difficult emotions, again, guilt about what they're doing, the impact on others, and that can make them feel worse. If someone has started to depend on self-harm, it can be harder to stop. So it's always good to try and have those conversations as soon as your young person feels able to. Okay, so when we're looking to keep someone safe and they have self-harmed, basically it is an unhealthy coping strategy. We'd rather they rely on something else, but it is their coping strategy. And if we take that away straight away, it may be that they are more vulnerable. So we don't recommend taking away their method of coping, but exploring instead other options that also help them cope. We recommend staying calm, because obviously as an adult, if you're starting to panic and get really upset, even though these are really normal reactions for parents to have, that's only going to elevate the anxiety and the worry and the guilt in your young person. So if at all possible, try to stay calm, try to be supportive and non-judgmental, so that they feel safe, basically. And show concern for their injury and work out if that needs medical attention or not. In terms of managing the risk, we've got two statements here. The first one which is, I'm worried that with how you're feeling at the moment, you may be also feeling the urge to self-harm, is more of a preemptive one, that you reading a situation, you've seen their behaviors and you're worried that they might be self-harming. So that's a really nice way of starting that conversation if you're not sure what's going on. In terms of when your young person has self-harmed, using something like, I'm wondering if we can find a way to keep you safe while you try to find alternative ways to cope, is a really nice way to say, I'm supporting you here. I know you need this right now, but also how can we move forward so that we can get you to a safer place while we find other ways to cope. Okay, over to Toby.
Thanks, Amy. So now going to be looking at suicidal feelings. So starting obviously with what that means. And actually, when we talk about suicidal feelings, it actually can be a broad range of different things. But along that sort of broad range, we usually sort of categorize it into two main groups. So that sort of first group of feelings are these kind of abstract thoughts and feelings about wanting to end their own life. This kind of thoughts maybe that things would be better off without you, that you don't want to go on anymore, that things are too much, that people life would be better without you in it. Those kind of abstract thoughts that can be frequent or infrequent. The other kind of group of thoughts that we talk about is more of these kind of specific planning about methods of suicide, how they would take their own life, what they would do, when they would do it. Again, that kind of specific, more kind of practical thoughts of ending their own life. And obviously, these can go hand in hand in some situations, but can also be bits of both, lots of both. It's obviously very different for every situation with every young person. In terms of what it feels like then to be suicidal, well, again, that can be really, there's so many examples of it and so many things that we would probably take up way too many slides, but we just kind of gathered some things that are quite frequent. Obviously, the kind of recurring feeling being that things are too hard to keep going. Obviously, we know that suicidal feelings can be frequent or they can be infrequent, and that goes with both of those groups. So it might be sort of the occasional thoughts of life being better off without you. It might be something that's on their mind quite often. Same with the plans as well. They're feelings that can bring up a lot of other emotions as well. When we think of suicidal feelings, it can just be sadness that we're talking about, but actually in reality, there's a lot of other emotions there. A lot of fear. It can be a scary thing to feel or to know that you have those feelings that might be coming up in the future. And also a feeling of guilt as well. We see in a lot of young people not wanting their parents or carers to know or their friends to know. And that guilt being tied into it and that fear being tied into it can really make these situations a lot more complicated and a lot more difficult than just sadness. And it's hard to understand these feelings for young people as well. So part of our role, part of a lot of professionals' role is to help understand what those feelings are, what that kind of mixed web of emotions are when it comes to suicidal feelings. What can you do then to support a young person? Well, Amy kind of mentioned a bit about being direct earlier, but we're going to go into a bit more depth about that here. We really encourage kind of directness in this situation. It can be a scary topic to bring up, and we're very aware of that, but we want you to know that actually bringing up the conversation of suicide actually doesn't increase the risk of suicide at all. And actually being direct is in a lot of situations what a young person might be looking for. They're just looking for that chance to say something or to be heard or to be understood. They might not take you up on that chance if you give it to them, but actually it can show to them that in the future, they know that they have a parent or a carer or someone in their life who is willing to have this conversation with them, even if they don't take it in the first instance. And that knowledge for them is really, really important in terms of encouraging them for support in the future. So we've given you some examples here about how to begin that directness. Just very sort of direct and simple questioning about, are you having suicidal thoughts or feelings? Obviously then questioning about their safety, that's obviously really important. And then sort of checking about the sort of plans to end their life, that other group of thoughts that I talked about earlier. So seeing where they are in terms of having plans, making plans, or is it instead the more kind of abstract thoughts that they're having? Obviously, we want you to take them seriously and to not judge them. We talked about guilt just now, and that's a feeling that a lot of young people have in these situations and in these conversations. And they might be expecting to be judged or not to be taken seriously or to be told off. Obviously, if you're experiencing this much emotional turmoil anyway, then being told off or being told that they shouldn't be feeling that way or that this is wrong isn't going to help them with that heavy burden of emotion that they're carrying at the moment. And then equally important, just want to be checking who else they've spoken to about it. As parents and caregivers, there's usually a bit of an assumption that we're their first port of call for this kind of help. And sometimes we don't realize how many good connections our young people have with other people, whether that's other adults or other people their age. It's important to kind of check in who they've chatted to and maybe who they want to speak to in the future. Again, whether it's someone from they already know or whether they're happy to start talking to professionals or to GPs and kind of beginning that conversation with them about who they'd like to reach out to, what they'd want support with. And we'll talk a little bit more in a second about how to help and be sort of collaborative with that. But we're going to just quickly touch on how to keep someone safe in a situation like this. And again, we're going to break down these two sides of thinking. So the first side, of course, talking about this kind of more suicidal thoughts, or sorry, the more kind of actual active suicides, the kind of plans and ideas like that. Obviously, if you're worried about an active suicide, really encourage you to call 999. If you can take your young person to A&E as well, then they can get mental health support as well as physical support if they've already begun kind of actions that might lead to self-harm as well. The other kind of side of this then, looking at those kind of more abstract thoughts, maybe you're not as worried for their immediate safety, but it is a kind of worry for you and maybe a worry for them as well. Obviously, again, we talked about kind of being collaborative with them, beginning that conversation with them about who they'd like to see and trying to encourage them to go with you or maybe on their own even to see the GP. And the GP is usually a kind of first step in getting to some more mental health support, and we'll talk more about that in just a second as well. What do young people tell us then? So on this slide, we kind of wanted to talk about what we've talked about this presentation with young people. So we have a group of young volunteers with us at Newport Mind. And so we've kind of shown them what we were going to be talking about today and kind of asked for their feedback in terms of what they want parents to know. Hopefully we've kind of covered some of this stuff already, but we want to go into it in a bit more detail now. So respect, again, kind of hopefully a bit of an obvious one that we've touched on a little bit. Again, not wanting to be talked down to or told off in these kind of situations. The next thing they wanted to bring up, they wanted parents to know is that they like a kind of a sense of acknowledgement. Obviously, first of all, acknowledgement that what they're going through is really tough and really hard. But beyond that, a kind of acknowledgement of their own strength at the moment. If they are dealing with suicidal feelings or even if they're dealing with self-harm, things like this, really an acknowledgement from you that even if they're coping in unhealthy ways, that they're still managing to cope, they're still managing to get on with things. And really that takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage as well. The last kind of 2 points on this slide are quite heavily linked together. We talk about autonomy first. So them still kind of having a sense of self and a sense of control. Amy mentioned this earlier, but this control is really, really important, especially when young people feel like their lives are out of their control or they feel powerless. And actually, if we make them feel even more powerless in situations like this, it can be really dangerous for their mental health. So letting them know that even that they're struggling, they still deserve a chance to have a say in what they get for support or where their life goes next. And then again, collaboration. So working together with your young person, working as a team with them to find that support, to get them excited or interested in accessing that kind of support and interested in sort of taking those next steps in their future. And they can have a lot of input in this as well. They might kind of bring up types of support that maybe you hadn't thought of, or they might tell you what they like and what they don't like in support. And again, it's working together with them to take those next steps. And now it's back over to Amy to talk to us a little bit about skills in signposting.
Thanks, Toby. Okay, so in the previous seminar that we delivered was about active listening. And these are the 4 skills in active listening that I just wanted to go briefly over again. There will be an active listening video, hopefully, for you to click on and find out a bit more about it. But these skills of praising someone for opening up about their mental health, empathizing with how difficult a situation is that they're facing, exploring that situation, exploring what it means to them and how they're interpreting it a bit so that you can understand from their eyes what it's like, and then reflecting back your understanding to them, such as in ways like saying, okay, so you feel upset because it shows that you're listening, but it also shows, gives an opportunity for the young person to say, actually, no, I feel like this because of that, actually. So it gives them an opportunity to clarify with you exactly what's going on. So for your understanding and for them to feel listened to. These are 4 really, really important skills. But there'll be more about this on the active listening video. What we wanted to go over is this tiers of support model. So where, as a parent, when you're faced with a young person who might be self-harming or experiencing suicidal feelings, it's exceptionally difficult and you cannot cope with it all yourself. So we're going to go through this tiers of support system so that you understand some of the different types of help out there and kind of how they connect, really. So right at the bottom, we've got self-help. So that would be sort of looking on the internet, reading a book, getting an app on your phone, finding out things about yourself that can support you effectively. The next level up from that, if you need more, is getting a support network. It might be friends, family, or if you're an adult yourself, it might be your colleagues. And then we come into the top section of this pyramid. And I've just added the little space wellbeing orange bit there because I'm going to come back to what that space wellbeing means in a minute. But the third sector and the GP are the next level of organisations that you would go to for help. So the third sector being places like Newport Mind for kind of lower level mental health interventions. And the GP is a first port of call and really a gateway to a lot of these other services that I'm going to discuss as well. So primary care mental health rather, is where you might be able to be assessed for your mental health and receive short-term interventions in a kind of basic mental health stuff like anxiety and low mood. If your young person needs more specialist long-term support, then it might be that CAMS, Children and Adolescent Mental Health Service, could become involved. And if it's something quite specific, maybe like an eating disorder, then you might get referred to specialist CAMS. The Space Wellbeing is a really, really useful panel that meet every week to discuss some of the referrals that are coming in for support. And what they will do is they will read the case notes and work out which of these organisations are best suited to help that young person. So really you can, as an adult, refer into lots of these services, but Space Wellbeing is a really good one route to access all. And the way that you could access the Space Wellbeing panel, you can access it through us at Newport Mind or through the GP. He's also able to make a referral to the Space Wellbeing panel. So any further information that you require on any of this, because it can be a bit overwhelming, then please do just reach out to, like I said, organisations like ourselves or to the GP, and we can support you through any further referrals that need to be made. Obviously, again, just to reiterate, in a crisis or emergency, to call 999 or to go to A&E. Okay, so signposting for your young person. We recommend Childline as a fantastic resource and something that your young person can access late at night if they need to talk to someone or things are getting overwhelming. They have, you can phone or you can do a web chat, and there's lots of useful information on their website. Young Minds is a really brilliant website for young people, and they have lots of blogs of other people who've been through things and what's helped them. So that one can really help reduce isolation. We've also got Samaritans, Youth Access and Papyrus that have got really great information all around suicidal feelings and self-harm. We would suggest maybe sharing some of these with your young person. It might be that you want to look at them together. It might be that you want to say, look, I've been recommended these resources. If you want to have a look and talk to me about any of that, then do. We've also put down there going to the GP, coming to Newport Mind. We have lots of different projects at in our children and young persons team, and that's all that comes under the Changing Minds projects. So we can always explore something that we've got that might be able to support your young person. It's also worth talking to the school safeguarding lead and the pastoral support teams because they are totally connected again into space wellbeing panels and CAMS and all of those specialist services. And they will also be able to look out for your young person at school and to provide any support in school that might be useful. And then again, A&E in a crisis. For you as a caregiver, there's two different strands really. Firstly, you might want further support as a parent in your parenting role. And we would recommend Young Minds and Talking Zone, as they have they offer parent consultations basically, so you can call them, tell them about what's going on for you, and they will be able to talk you through some ideas to help support you. But then also, this is a very difficult time to be a parent, and it's difficult to go through your young people being so vulnerable. And if that's affecting your mental health, then Samaritans, Side by Side, the GP, or us at Newport Mind can offer you support as an adult within your own right. There's also Families First in Newport and within Newport Mind that can do family support and work sort of as a unit. Okay, so that's it from us. We thank you very much for coming to look at our video today. And if you have any further questions or queries about anything that we've spoken about today, then please do get in touch with us at Newport Mind, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Okay, thanks very much.
Bye-bye.